They said the dog was too broken, too wild, too traumatized by war to ever be safe around kids. But when Laya knelt beside his kennel, her tiny hand pressed against the chain-link fence, the growling stopped. The big German shepherd lowered his head and let out a slow, low whimper, like he'd been waiting for her all along. No one knew that just weeks later, that same dog would carry her limp body through the rain and straight into an ER, saving her life when no one else even realized she was dying. It all started in a shelter no one liked to talk about. Out on the edge of town, past the gas station and the broken-down silo, there was a long, low building with metal walls that groaned when the wind kicked up. Inside was a section they didn't show the public. Dogs labeled non-adoptable, former military, failed police canines, dogs that had bitten handlers or gone through too much to be trusted again. That's where Laya found him. She was 6 years old, with 2 missing teeth, a messy ponytail, and a second-hand coat 2 sizes too big. Her parents worked double shifts. Dad was a trucker, Mom cleaned houses, and Saturdays were the only time they could take her anywhere that wasn't school or church. They thought the shelter visit would be cute. Let her pet some puppies, burn off her energy. They weren't planning to adopt. Definitely not that dog. He was called Shadow, a war dog who'd served 2 tours overseas. Word was, his last handler got blown up in a roadside ambush, and Shadow hadn't let anyone near him since. When they walked past his cage, he was snarling in the corner, eyes narrowed, teeth bared like knives. But Leia didn't flinch. She knelt down, reached her hand through the bars, even as her dad shouted, "Laya, no!" And Shadow, this battle-worn beast who'd scared off grown men, crawled forward like a broken machine and nuzzled her wrist. That was it. No one could explain it. Not the shelter workers, not the vet, not even her mom, who cried all the way home because they couldn't afford the adoption fee, and then cried again when the shelter waived it, saying, "Maybe this was meant to be." Shadow came home the next day. It wasn't easy. He didn't like loud noises or strangers. He slept with one eye open. But he followed Laya like a shadow, hence the name, and slept beside her bed every night, like he was guarding her from something the rest of them couldn't see. Laya talked to him constantly. She told him about school, about her imaginary friends, about how her grandma used to make peanut butter cookies on Sundays, and later about something she called the itchies. At first it sounded like dry skin, a rash, maybe a bug bite. She scratched a lot, mostly at night, said it burned. But every time her mom looked, the spots were gone, or not bad enough to worry, until they were. It was a Tuesday morning when things changed. Her mom had already left for her cleaning job, and her dad was on the road. Laya was supposed to go to school, but she said she felt tired. Her forehead was warm, her arms covered in long-sleeved pajamas, even though it was already 70 degrees outside. Shadow knew something wasn't right. He circled her 3 times that morning, sniffed her neck, her hands, her pillow. She giggled and called him Mr. Worried Pants, but his tail didn't wag. He paced the hallway, barking once, sharp and clipped, then ran to the door, then back to her room. No one came. By noon, Leia hadn't eaten. She tried to pour cereal, but her hands were shaky, and she spilled the milk. She sat on the kitchen floor and cried, while Shadow licked the drops off her fingers. At 12:41 p.m., Laya collapsed. Shadow barked so loud, the neighbors 3 doors down said it sounded like a scream. There was no one else in the house. So Shadow did the only thing he knew how to do. He lowered his body to the floor, nudged her small frame until her arms wrapped loosely around his neck, and stood up. Slowly, carefully, like lifting something fragile. He took 1 step, then another, and then he walked out the back door. If you're moved by stories like this, real stories of animal heroes and the people who love them, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Heroes for Animals, where we bring you true, unforgettable moments of loyalty, bravery, and heart. No one knows how long it took him to walk. From their duplex to the highway was almost 2 miles, much of it gravel and broken sidewalk. The rain had started by then, not heavy, just enough to make everything slick and gray. Cars honked. Some drivers slowed down, unsure what they were seeing. A massive German shepherd, soaked to the bone, carrying a child across his back like a battlefield rescue. Someone finally called 911. By the time the ambulance arrived, Shadow was sitting beside Laya, still as stone. His ears were down. His eyes were on her face. He didn't move until the paramedics touched her. Then he snarled. 3 EMTs backed away. A nurse from the ER, young, smart, calm, stepped forward slowly, crouched, and spoke to him like a soldier. "It's okay, boy. We've got her now." Shadow lowered his head. "And let them take her." In the emergency room, the doctors thought it was an allergy at first. Maybe a virus. The red spots weren't mosquito bites or chicken pox. They were angry welts, burning in perfect circles. Her temperature spiked. Her breathing slowed. She muttered in her sleep, "Don't tell. Daddy said don't tell." Shadow lay at the end of the hallway, paws stretched in front of him, unmoving for hours. When they tried to put him outside, he growled until they left him alone. A nurse brought him a towel. He didn't touch it. Later that night, a social worker named Clara Jennings arrived to ask questions. She'd seen neglect cases before, saw the signs, but this one didn't make sense. The family had no record, no history of abuse. Bills were tight, sure, but they were working folks. Why hadn't they taken her to a doctor? Why had the dog known before anyone else? What they didn't know yet. Not the doctors, not the social worker, not even the parents, was that Leia's beloved stuffed bear, the one she slept with every night, had absorbed something toxic. Something left behind from her dad's last haul. Industrial adhesive spilled in the truck cabin. Invisible to the eye, but not to the nose of a trained canine. And Shadow? He had smelled that poison before, back when he lost his handler, back when no one listened. Until it was too late. At first, they thought she'd be fine. The ER nurse had seen worse. Kids with bee stings gone bad. Allergic reactions to antibiotics. Even a few heat strokes. But Laya was different. She came in quiet, pale, burning up with fever, and covered in odd red marks shaped like coins. Her body didn't seem to know what to do, sweating 1 minute, shivering the next. By the time Dr. Patel arrived from pediatrics, they'd ruled out chickenpox, ringworm, and bed bugs. But the rash was spreading. And Shadow? Shadow hadn't moved from his post at the ER hallway door. Nurses tiptoed around him like he was a statue made of warning signs. Some of them whispered that the dog had carried the little girl here. Others thought that was just a rumor. But the ones who saw it happen, they didn't say anything at all. They just watched him in silence. The way you watch something sacred you don't fully understand. Inside the room, Clara Jennings sat in the corner flipping through her notepad. She was a seasoned social worker, been with family services for over 25 years. Most people in her line of work burned out before 10. Not Clara. She had a soft voice and sharp eyes, and she wasn't in the business of punishing parents. She was in the business of protecting children. And something about this case didn't feel right. She'd read the file. No history of abuse. No signs of neglect. The parents both worked. The child was well fed. Clean clothes. No school complaints. So why was this little girl fighting for her life? "She's been itchy for weeks," the mother Jenna said, wiping tears from her cheek. "I thought it was just dry skin or maybe detergent. We couldn't afford a pediatrician right now, but I bought cream, switched soaps." "Did the itching get worse recently?" Clara asked gently. Jenna nodded. "About a week ago. My husband came back from his delivery route, and that's when I noticed she wouldn't stop scratching even in her sleep." "And what was he hauling?" "Something for a factory in Kansas. Adhesives and sealants, I think." She looked up, suddenly alarmed. "You don't think—" "We don't know yet," Clara said, writing it down. That's when the nurse walked in with a sealed plastic bag. "We took this off her bedroll," she said, handing it to Clara. Inside was a small, beat-up stuffed bear with patchy fur and a pink button eye. "She wouldn't let go of it when we first brought her in." Clara turned it over. It smelled faintly of something sharp, bitter, almost metallic. Outside, Shadow's ears perked. His nose twitched once. Then again, he stood up slowly, like a soldier receiving orders only he could hear. The nurse at the desk flinched as he walked past her, but he didn't even glance her way. He moved with purpose, straight toward the examination room. A second later, his body stiffened. He growled, low and deep. The bear was in there. Dr. Patel raised an eyebrow when she saw the dog's reaction. "What's going on with him?" Clara held up the bag. "I think he's trying to tell us something." The doctor looked inside. "That bear came from her bed. She sleeps with it every night." Dr. Patel opened a drawer and pulled out a fresh evidence swab. "Let's find out what exactly she's been sleeping with." In the hospital lab, the results came back fast. Industrial-grade adhesive. Tiny amounts absorbed into the fabric. It wouldn't have been deadly on its own, but prolonged contact with open skin. In a child already weakened by a scabies infection, that was enough to send her body into full-blown systemic shock. Back in the waiting area, Clara shared the findings with Officer Sam Thatcher, who'd arrived after his shift to check on the girl and the dog. "Her father works for Crossland Trucking," Clara explained. "He was hauling this stuff, and somewhere along the way, it must have leaked. We think he brought back samples in little tins. Leia liked to play with them. Probably used one to pretend feed the bear or something." Sam frowned. "He didn't know it was dangerous?" "He never meant to harm her," Clara said. "But not knowing doesn't make it harmless." Sam sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "And Shadow?" "He smelled it before anyone else did," Clara said, nodding toward the hallway where the dog lay curled up again. "He knew something didn't belong. Knew she needed help." Sam looked toward the silent animal. "He's not just a dog," he murmured. "He's a damn war veteran." Later that afternoon, Mike Cooper, Leia's father, arrived. He was sunburned and dusty from driving through 3 states without stopping. A man who looked like he hadn't slept in 2 days. His eyes were wild when he saw the nurse at the counter. "My daughter. Where's my daughter?" Sam met him halfway and gently led him into a private room. "She's stable," Sam said. "But she's been exposed to something serious. We think it's connected to your last delivery." Mike blinked. "What? How?" "I followed protocol. I sealed the trailer. Was there a leak?" Clara asked gently. Mike hesitated. "Yeah, a tin tipped over when I braked hard near Wichita. The canister didn't bust, just the cap. There was glue on the tarp, but the dispatcher told me to wipe it off and keep going." "Did you take any samples home?" Clara asked. Mike looked confused. "Just the usual promotional tins they give out, souvenirs." Clara pulled out one from her purse, recovered from Leia's toy box earlier. Mike paled. "She loves those things," he said, voice cracking. "She keeps her little treasures in 'em." Sam's jaw tightened. "One of those treasures almost killed her." Mike slumped into the chair, face buried in his hands. "I didn't know," he whispered. "I didn't know." That night, Dr. Patel addressed a small team of hospital staff, social workers, and a reporter from the West Pine Chronicle who'd caught wind of the girl brought in by a dog. She kept the medical terms simple. Scabies was the root issue, worsened by an allergic reaction to the adhesive. The stuffed bear was contaminated. It kept re-exposing her every time she hugged it. "And the dog?" the reporter asked. She smiled. "The dog saved her." By 10 p.m., the hallway was quiet. Leia was sleeping peacefully, her arms bandaged, her fever down. Shadow rested at the foot of her bed, finally allowed to stay. Clara sat next to Sam in the waiting room, sipping black coffee from a vending machine cup. "You know," she said, "if that dog hadn't carried her here—" "I know," Sam said quietly. He leaned back in the plastic chair, watching the old shepherd through the glass window. Some people think heroes wear badges, he murmured. Sometimes they just wear fur. The next morning, Mike visited Laya's room. Shadow stood when he entered, ears forward, body tense. But when Laya opened her eyes and smiled, weak but bright, the dog sat back down. "She's okay," Mike whispered. "You really brought her here." Leia reached out slowly, her hand brushing her dad's sleeve. "Shadow heard the itchy voice," she said softly. "The bear was yelling." No one fully understood what she meant, but Shadow did, and he'd made sure someone finally listened. The morning air inside West Pine Community Hospital was sharp with the scent of disinfectant, and something else. Uncertainty. Nurses moved quietly between rooms, speaking in hushed tones. Leia Cooper's case had spread through the staff like wildfire. Everyone knew the story by now. A 6-year-old girl carried through the rain by her dog after collapsing at home. Her stuffed bear had tested positive for industrial adhesive. The girl was recovering, but no one could quite believe what had almost happened, or how close she came to being just another tragic headline. Shadow, the retired military K-9 who'd saved her, was now a legend in the building. People stopped and stared when he walked past. He didn't bark, didn't play, just followed Laya's scent and stood guard. He'd barely eaten in 2 days. Dr. Anita Patel leaned over the counter in the pediatric ward, staring at Laya's most recent blood work. "Her white cell count is coming down," she murmured. "That's a good sign." Clara Jennings stood beside her, sipping coffee from a reusable mug that said, "You mess with one kid, you mess with me." She'd been in and out of hospitals for most of her career, but this case was unlike anything she'd seen. "She still won't let go of the bear," Clara said, shaking her head. "Even after we explained it made her sick." "Of course not," Dr. Patel replied. "It smells like home to her, like her dad, like safety. That's the cruelest part of this." They glanced through the glass window into Laya's room. She was lying under a soft blue blanket, her arm still wrapped in gauze, one cheek pressed against the worn stuffed bear. Her eyes were half-lidded, but alert. And Shadow? He was curled in a tight circle under her bed, his ear twitching every time the monitor beeped. Downstairs in the hospital cafeteria, Officer Sam Thatcher was meeting with Mike Cooper. The father looked rough, his flannel shirt wrinkled, his trucker's cap stained with rain and road grime. But there was a new kind of stillness in him. He wasn't frantic anymore, just hollowed out. "I spoke to your dispatcher," Sam said. "He admitted you reported the leak on April 28th. Said someone higher up told you to wipe it off and keep going." Mike clenched his jaw. "I followed orders. I didn't know the stuff was dangerous." Sam nodded. "We believe you. But Crossland Trucking? They're already lawyering up. Looks like they knew more than they let on." Mike let out a bitter breath. "They gave me those sample tins like always. Laya loved using them for her treasures. She also used them to feed her bear," Sam added. "We found adhesive residue not just on the bear, but on her hands, on her pillowcase. It was everywhere." Mike's hand shook around his coffee cup. "My girl almost died because of something I brought home." "You didn't mean to," Sam said, his voice low. "But now we need to make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else." Back in Laya's room, Dr. Patel sat on the edge of the bed, her voice soft. "Sweetheart, we need to give Smokey a bath," she said. "A really deep one, like a bear spa." Laya hugged the toy tighter. "No." Clara crouched next to the bed. "He'll be okay, baby. We just want to make sure you don't get any more itchies." Shadow stood, not barked, not growled, just stood. Then he stepped forward, resting his chin gently on the bear's fuzzy back. Laya blinked. "You too?" she whispered. Shadow licked the bear once, then turned and sat beside the doctor, like he was agreeing. Reluctantly, Leia handed over the toy. The bear was sealed in a clear plastic bag and taken to the lab again. Dr. Patel ordered new scans, not just surface tests, but full fiber analysis under a high-powered microscope. What she found made her stomach flip. Yes, It absorbed the adhesive, she said. But here's the thing. Every time Laya cuddled with it, even after the initial exposure, it reactivated, like it was sweating out the toxins into her skin. Her immune system couldn't fight it because she was sleeping in it night after night. Clara's eyes narrowed. And no one would have known without Shadow. Dr. Patel nodded. That dog saved her, twice. At the same time, Diane Porter, a journalist from the West Pine Chronicle, was writing the story of her life. She'd originally dismissed the case as overblown, but the more she dug, the more she uncovered. Medical negligence due to poverty, corporate cover-ups, and a dog who saw what humans missed. The headline practically wrote itself. Saved by a Shadow. How a retired canine exposed a corporate cover-up. Diane printed it out and handed a copy to Chief Warren that afternoon. He read it once, then again, and sighed. You're gonna make some people real uncomfortable, he said. Good, she replied. Comfort is how we miss stuff like this. Later that evening, the hospital hosted an impromptu press conference in the children's wing. It wasn't fancy, just a folding table, a podium, and a bunch of local reporters with notepads and shaky phone cameras. Laya didn't attend. She was still too weak. But her parents stood behind Dr. Patel, hands clasped. Shadow stood front and center. The mayor called him a hero. The hospital director offered him a custom-embroidered therapy vest. Someone from the state vet board called about formally recognizing the animal's instinctual service capacity, whatever that meant. But Shadow didn't care. He just wanted to go back upstairs to Laya. Clara sat beside the girl later that night and handed her a brand-new teddy bear. This one clean, fluffy, and still in the gift shop bag. His name's Captain, Clara said. He's a special hospital bear. No itchies. Laya smiled weakly. He's nice. But he's not smoky. Clara nodded. No, he's not. From under the bed, Shadow rested his head on Laya's leg. Her fingers drifted down and curled into the fur behind his ear. You still my bear? She whispered. Shadow thumped his tail. The next morning, Crossland Trucking issued a formal apology. They also offered to pay all of Laya's medical expenses, but only after public pressure and the threat of legal action. Sam filed an official report with the State Department, recommending a full investigation. Clara drafted a family care plan to keep Laya with her parents, with regular check-ins and long-term support. She noted Shadow as part of her emotional stability system. Dr. Patel sent samples of the adhesive-soaked bear to the CDC to explore wider health implications. And Diane's article went viral, not just in West Pine, everywhere. People shared photos of Shadow, sent donations. One group offered to buy him a gold medal, but none of that mattered to Laya. All she wanted was her dog, the one who listened when she said, "It hurts." The one who didn't need words to know something was wrong. The one who carried her when her legs gave out and her body failed. The one who sat beside her now, calm, quiet, and completely hers. Shadow didn't dream much anymore, not the way he used to. But sometimes, on quiet nights like this, when the hospital hallways were empty and the world stopped buzzing just long enough, he would remember. The sand, the gunfire, the voice in his earpiece going silent, and the sharp, stinging scent of chemicals that stayed in his nose for days. That scent was back, and this time it wasn't coming from a battlefield. It was coming from a little girl's teddy bear. Upstairs in the pediatric wing, Dr. Patel was scrolling through the latest skin biopsy reports from Laya. The worst was behind them, at least medically. The red marks were finally fading. The inflammation was under control, but she couldn't shake one thing. Something about the bear still bothered her. Even after we removed it, she said to Clara, her reaction didn't stop for another full day. It was like the toxins were embedded in her system, reactivating every time her skin made contact. Clara tapped her pen against her clipboard. You think it was deeper than the surface? Maybe. Or maybe she was getting re-exposed again and again in microscopic doses, and the bear was just the last piece of the puzzle. They both looked toward the door, where Shadow lay across the threshold like a doormat with muscle. He hadn't left Laya's side in 72 hours. You know, Clara said, half to herself, he smelled it before we did. Because he remembered, Dr. Patel replied. Later that morning, Sam returned to the Coopers' house with Clara to gather more evidence. The rain from the previous week had dried, leaving streaks of mud on the porch. Inside, the home was modest but warm. School artwork on the fridge, a family Bible on the coffee table, and a toy bin in the corner overflowing with mismatched plastic animals. Clara stepped into Leia's bedroom. Her eyes scanned the shelf where several small metal tins sat in a neat row. "Those look like tobacco tins," Sam said, picking one up. Clara opened one. It was empty, but the interior glistened faintly under the light. "Industrial adhesive," she muttered. Sam nodded. "Matches what the lab found."
She called them Daddy Siggies, Clara recalled. Probably thought they were candy boxes or treasure tins.
She didn't know they were poison. In the corner of the room, near the window, Sam noticed a wooden chair. It was pushed against the wall, right below the sill. On the windowsill were faint scratch marks, just at child height. "She stood here a lot," he said quietly, "maybe to cool off from the itching." Clara stepped forward, running her hand jettied along the chair's surface. It was worn smooth on the edges, but there were tiny nail gouges where Leia must have gripped it, holding on during the worst of it. "I think," Clara whispered, "she didn't want to wake her parents, so she just stood here and scratched." Sam didn't say anything. He didn't have to. Later that day, back at the hospital, Shadow's behavior changed. He started pacing again, not wildly, not frantically, just in slow, deliberate circles. He would sniff the air near Leia's EV line, her sheets, even her hair. "He's looking for something," Dr. Patel observed. "Or making sure it's gone," Clara added. That afternoon, the lab received new results. Tests confirmed trace elements of phenolic resin compounds, used manufacturing adhesives, still present on fibers from Leia's pajamas and hair ties. They'd washed everything, twice, but it wasn't just the bear. The exposure had been everywhere. Invisible, but real. Mike Cooper stood in the hospital lobby, fidgeting with his truck keys. When Clara told him about the new results, he pressed his palms to his eyes and exhaled hard. "I had that damn stuff all over my clothes," he said. "The spill happened in the trailer, but I must have tracked it into the cab. My pants, my jacket. Leia hugged me when I got home." He looked up, voice breaking. "I poisoned my own kid, didn't I?" "You didn't mean to," Clara said firmly, "and now you're doing everything right." Mike shook his head. "It doesn't matter what I meant. I didn't protect her. Shadow did." That night, Leia had a dream. In it, she was a butterfly. She was stuck inside a glass jar, scratching, fluttering, pushing her wings against the edges. But every time she tried to fly, her skin burned. She cried out, but the sky didn't hear her. Then came the dog, big and black and quiet. He nudged the jar with his nose, just once, and the lid rolled off. Leia flew out. The sun hit her wings. She flew higher and higher until the pain stopped, and she could breathe again. When she woke up the next morning, Shadow was on the bed beside her, his massive head resting across her ankles. "You got me out," she whispered. Shadow opened one eye and blinked. Dr. Patel entered moments later, smiling brightly. "Your vitals are steady. You've turned a corner, sweet girl." She clipped a new butterfly hairpin into Leia's braid and handed her a drawing pad. "Doctor orders, you make something happy today." Leia nodded. "Oh, okay." In the cafeteria, Sam and Clara sat across from Chief Warren and Diane Porter. "The evidence from the truck?" Warren asked. Sam slid a manila folder across the table. "Confirmed. The company failed to log the spill, then ordered Mike to discard the paperwork, and it's a cover-up." Diane flipped through the photos, her eyes scanning the chemical manifest, the damaged tin, and the handwritten journal Mike kept from the road. "I can work with this," she said. "The Chronicle's going national with the story. We've already gotten interest from NPR. Warren sighed. Corporate lawyers are circling. They'll try to bury it. Clara looked up. Not if a child's face is front and center. Diane grinned. That's the plan. Back upstairs, Leia was coloring a picture of a dog with wings. Clara tapped the paper. That's beautiful. Who's that? Shadow, Leia said. He flies when I'm asleep. Well, he definitely flew to save you, Clara said. Dr. Patel leaned in, inspecting the picture. Is he your superhero? Leia thought for a moment. No, she said, he's just my dog. The following day, the hospital released a press statement, naming Shadow an honorary therapy dog. Photos of him in a miniature hospital vest, with protector stitched in red thread, circulated on social media. A local veteran group donated funds for Shadow's lifetime care. Leia's pediatrician offered free follow-ups for a year. Donations poured in for the Coopers, enough to cover rent, groceries, and even a few toys. But Leia only wanted one thing, to go home, with Shadow. As the discharge date drew near, Dr. Patel called one final meeting with family services, hospital staff, and the Coopers. She laid out the findings one last time. A combination of neglect by Crossland Trucking, poor communication, and environmental exposure that turned a manageable skin condition into a near tragedy. Clara laid down the recommendation, monitored reunification of the family with support services. And Shadow? He would be re-registered, not as a retired canine, but as Leia's full-time emotional support animal. The motion passed without objection. 2 days later, under the bright morning sun, Leia walked out of the hospital on unsteady legs. She wore a yellow hoodie and butterfly sneakers. Beside her, Shadow walked tall. At home, she found her bed freshly made, her window washed, and Captain, the new bear, waiting on her pillow. But Leia only reached for one thing, Shadow's ear. Home now, she whispered. He wagged once, then lay down beside her bed like he'd never left. It wasn't over. Not really. Leia might have been home, her skin healing, her laughter slowly returning to the corners of the house. But for Officer Sam Thatcher, Clara Jennings, and Dr. Anita Patel, the real battle had just begun. Because behind the miracle rescue and the viral headlines lay something darker. A quiet truth, buried under spilled glue and corporate silence. And at the center of it all was Shadow, the one who had known the truth from the beginning and carried it, quite literally, across his back. At 6:00 a.m. on a Monday morning, Sam pulled into the Cooper family driveway again. The truck was still parked out front. Mike's rig, now gathering dust instead of miles. Sam opened the cab door with the spare key Mike had given him during the investigation. The inside looked like a second home. Old receipts, food wrappers, a worn flannel blanket, and a picture of Leia tucked into the sun visor. But Sam wasn't there to look at family mementos. He was there for evidence. He slid open the floor compartment behind the passenger seat. That's where he found them, a row of tin containers, just like the one Leia had played with. Some still had faint markings, product codes and chemical names. Others were blank. He opened one, just a whisper of powder at the bottom. But that was enough. Within seconds, Sam felt a tingling on his fingers. Not pain, not heat, just irritation. His skin itched. He dropped the tin and grabbed his phone. "Clara," he said into the receiver, "we've got a problem, and it's bigger than we thought." Across town, Clara was preparing her notes for the State Child Welfare Review. The Coopers case had caught attention at the state level, especially after the West Pine Chronicle article went viral. That meant paperwork, a lot of it. But when Sam called, her focus shifted fast. Within the hour, she was standing in the Cooper driveway, too, wearing gloves as she helped bag and label the containers. She didn't need a lab to tell her what her nose already did. "That smell," she said. "It's like turpentine and burnt rubber." "It's phenolic resin?" Sam muttered, "and it's still active." Clara raised an eyebrow. "They gave this stuff out to truckers as promotional gifts?" Sam nodded grimly. "Mike's journal says the reps handed them out by the dozen." No labels, no warnings. And no cleanup after the spill, Clara added. Sam closed the lid on the evidence box. We need to hit the company, now. At the offices of Crossland Trucking, Marcus Crossland wasn't in the mood for visitors. The CEO had already taken a beating in the press. Between the lawsuit from the hospital and calls from the Environmental Protection Agency, his empire was under siege. But when Sam and Clara showed up with a folder full of photos, test results, and a signed affidavit from Mike Cooper, he couldn't ignore it. You're here to what? Shut us down? Marcus barked. I'm here to hold you accountable, Sam replied evenly. Clara placed a swab bag on the desk. Inside was the tin with residue still visible. This is what your company allowed into the hands of a child. You called it a sample. We call it a weapon. Marcus scoffed. That girl didn't die, did she? Sam stepped forward, voice low and steady. No, but she almost did. And if it weren't for that dog, you'd be reading her obituary right now. There was a pause, the kind that makes your ears ring. Then Marcus muttered, You'll be hearing from our lawyers. Clara crossed her arms. Good, so will the state attorney general. Back at the hospital, Dr. Patel held a staff debriefing about the long-term effects of Laya's exposure. She'll be okay physically, she told the team, but this has changed how we think about environmental exposure in pediatric cases. We missed it because we didn't look past the obvious. She paused, then added, Shadow did. Later that afternoon, Dr. Patel met with Clara in the hospital courtyard. Birds chirped in the trees, and patients sat outside under the sun with fleece blankets and plastic cups of juice. Clara opened her briefcase and pulled out the finalized care plan. Everything's in place, she said. Laya stays with her parents, regular check-ins, financial aid for medical expenses. And Shadow? Dr. Patel smiled. Already registered as an official ESA, emotional support animal. He's got a badge and everything. Clara grinned. That dog deserves a medal. He deserves peace, Dr. Patel said quietly. Meanwhile, at home, Laya was doing better. Her appetite had returned. She was drawing again, mostly pictures of butterflies and big black dogs with superhero capes. Shadow followed her everywhere, lying under the table while she colored or sitting quietly at the door during bath time. Mike had taken time off work. Jenna had scaled back her shifts. For the first time in years, the house was calm. But something was still off. At night, Laya would wake up crying. Not from pain, from fear. The bear, she whispered one night. I think it's still here. Jenna assured her it wasn't. The bear was gone, sealed in a biohazard bag and incinerated at the hospital. But Laya didn't mean the toy. She meant the feeling, the itch, the silence, the not being heard. Clara visited the next morning with Officer Sam. They brought along a special guest, Diane Porter, the reporter who'd started it all. She'd come not to interview, but to deliver something, a laminated copy of the front page from the West Pine Chronicle, framed in wood. Across the top, she said it hurt. He believed her. Beneath it, a photo of Shadow with his muzzle gently pressed against Laya's cheek. Laya stared at it for a long time. Then she turned to Shadow. You're famous, she whispered. Shadow thumped his tail once. In the following weeks, everything began to change. Crossland Trucking faced civil fines and federal scrutiny. New legislation was introduced at the state level, mandating stricter labeling and safety procedures for chemical transports. Clara received calls from caseworkers in other counties. Hospitals requested workshops. A public health campaign launched under the name the Shadow Protocol, a toolkit for detecting environmental risks in unexplained child illness. And Shadow? He got a new collar, leather with a small silver plate engraved in block letters, Trusted. One sunny Saturday, the Cooper family hosted a cookout in their backyard. Just neighbors, church friends, hospital staff, and a few folks from the department. Shadow lay under the picnic table, his nose twitching as the scent of hot dogs and charcoal drifted through the air. Laya bounced around in butterfly wings and sparkly shoes, introducing her dog to everyone as her hero. When someone asked how he knew she was sick, she just shrugged and said, "He listens different." Clara watched from a lawn chair, sipping lemonade. Sam stood beside her, arms crossed, eyes soft. "You think he remembers it all?" Clara asked. Sam nodded. "Every detail." She glanced over at the dog, lying peacefully in the grass, head tilted just enough to track Laya's every move. "Good," she said, "because we do too." The autumn sun spilled golden light across West Pine Community Park, blanketing the trees in soft hues of amber and rust. It was one of those perfect fall days, when the wind smelled like cinnamon and the air had just the right bite to remind you winter wasn't far off. Laya Cooper ran through the grass, laughing as leaves crunched under her butterfly sneakers. Her yellow jacket flapped behind her like a cape. At her heels, Shadow galloped at a slow, steady pace, tail wagging like a flag in the wind. He never let her get more than a few steps ahead, just in case. It had been 2 months since the hospital discharge, 2 months since Shadow carried her down the road and through the ER doors. Since the story broke wide open, drawing national attention and sparking legal reforms across multiple states. Now things were quieter. Not healed, not forgotten, but better. The house didn't smell like disinfectant anymore. The scratching had stopped, and Laya didn't talk about the bear. Not much. Instead, she talked about school, Halloween costumes, and how she wanted to be a veterinarian when she grew up, so I can help dogs the way Shadow helped me. That morning, Clara Jennings had driven out from town to attend what the Coopers were calling a celebration picnic. It wasn't a press event, no TV crews, just folding tables with crockpots and casseroles, mason jars full of sunflowers, and a potluck sign-up taped to the back fence. Sam showed up in jeans and boots, off-duty but always alert. He brought peach cobbler and a jug of sweet tea. Dr. Patel arrived a little late, still in her scrubs, with a chocolate cake balanced in one hand and a folder of lab reports in the other. "Old habits," she laughed, setting them both down. "One sweet, one serious." After lunch, the group gathered near the swing set for something special. Mike Cooper stood with his arm around Leia, while Jenna wiped her eyes, trying not to smudge her mascara. Sam cleared his throat and nodded toward Clara. She stepped forward, holding a small box wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. "We're not big on medals or ceremonies," she began, "but we are big on truth." She opened the box and pulled out a hand-stitched bandana, red, with yellow lettering that read, "Official Hero, Property of Leia Cooper." Clara knelt down and tied it gently around Shadow's neck. The old dog stood still as stone, letting her finish before turning to nuzzle her cheek with his snout. "You earned that, big guy," Clara whispered. The crowd clapped. Someone sniffled, and Leia held up her drawing. It was the same one she'd been working on in the hospital, now colored in and laminated. A dog with wings, standing guard over a little girl in butterfly shoes. At the bottom, in bright purple crayon, it said, "It doesn't itch anymore." As people began packing up, Sam and Clara sat on a bench near the playground, watching the kids run wild. "I've seen a lot in this job," Sam said, "but that dog still amazes me." Clara nodded. Sometimes the ones who've been through the most know exactly when to act. They don't need a badge or words, just instinct. Sam sipped from a paper cup of cider. You ever wonder why he trusted her so fast? After everything he went through overseas? Clara smiled softly. Maybe she reminded him of something he lost. Or maybe she gave him something he'd never had. A reason to come home. Back at the Cooper house that evening, Leia was curled up on the couch, wrapped in a fleece blanket, eating popcorn with Shadow snuggled close beside her. On the TV was a rerun of Lassie. Leia giggled as the collie barked and ran toward danger. "Shadow would never leave me in a well," she said confidently. Mike chuckled from the kitchen. "Nope. He'd pull you out, patch you up, and probably file a police report." Jenna laughed too. "And then nap for 3 days." Later, before bedtime, Leia placed her drawing inside a special folder. It would be going to school the next day for show and tell. As she tucked herself into bed, she looked down at the rug, where Shadow was already stretched out, one paw over the other, eyes half closed. "Hey," she whispered. "Remember when I couldn't sleep because of the itchies?" Shadow lifted his head, ears twitching. "I don't have them anymore," she said, as if telling him something he didn't already know. "You fixed it. You saved me." She reached down and touched his ear. "Thanks for carrying me, Shadow." He let out a low, soft huff of breath, the kind only she could understand. Downstairs, Jenna sat at the table with a steaming mug of chamomile tea, scrolling through the comments on the latest Heroes for Animals video. The one about Shadow. There were thousands of views. Messages from veterans, from parents, from people who had never met a dog but now wanted one. One comment read, "I cried watching this. That dog knew. He just knew. We don't deserve animals like this." Another, "I hope Shadow lives a long, peaceful life. And I hope Leia never forgets what he did for her." Jenna clicked like on both and wiped her eyes. A week later, Shadow's story was featured in a national news segment. They showed pictures of him in uniform, footage of him at the hospital, and even a clip of Leia reading a poem about him in her school auditorium. The segment ended with the question posed by the reporter. Can a dog be more than just a pet? Can he be a healer, a protector, a mirror of what we sometimes forget to be ourselves? The answer, of course, was already written on a red bandana. And now, to those of you who've followed this story, thank you. Thank you for staying with us through every moment. From a little girl whispering about her itchies, to a battle-worn canine who refused to give up, to the discovery that one dog's instinct could change not just one life, but an entire system. You believed in Leia. You believed in Shadow. And more than anything, you reminded us all that listening, really listening, can save lives. Now we'd love to hear from you. Have you ever witnessed an animal save someone? Physically, emotionally, or even just by being there at the right time? Let us know in the comments. And if you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe to Heroes for Animals for more real-life stories like this one. Until next time, stay kind, stay alert, and never underestimate a dog with a mission.